Marriage is once and forever. My mother did not just say that once, she lived and breathed it. Where mother was a steady force of nature, my dad was not easy. More than once when I was growing up and tensions were high, I'd say to my mom, "Let's get a divorce." Her answer, without one hint of martyrdom, was inevitably some version of, "Shelley, I love your dad, and marriage is once and forever." Sticking was a theme in my family. Take, for instance, the piano. My parents believed that every child should have musical training and stuck me on a piano bench when I was 5. I hated everything about the piano. I hated my teacher, a pasty, white, wimpy kind of woman whose perfume greeted us at the door a full minute before she did. "Why are you making me do this?" I asked Mother. I pleaded, I cried. The battle between us over the piano raged for years. "Shelley, honey, when we start something, we stick with it." And so we practiced 2 hours a day, 6 days a week for 13 years. That's roughly 8,101 hours of hell. But my people stick to our values, to our vows, to the piano. I stepped into adulthood wanting no part of relationships that felt to me like sticking for sticking's sake, whether with people or musical instruments. In spite of my best efforts to stay unstuck, somewhere along the way, I drank the Kool-Aid. I tweaked the recipe a bit to skip over the marriage and family part. My version went something like, kissing means love, love means commitment, commitment means sticking together, and only if it's easy. I was passionate about becoming an actress and singer, and after earning a degree in musical theater, I moved around quite a bit. Regional theaters, cruise ships, way the hell off Broadway. No matter what zip code I called home, I did more than my share of kissing and was hardwired for that very short leap between kissing and sticking. When you're kissing the wrong people, as I was apt to do, sticking never goes well. In the mid-90s, I landed back in Dallas. Not long after, I was introduced to a man named Jim. It was not a fix-up. Our paths crossed through mutual friends, and as a group, we occasionally met up for lunch. Jim was wicked smart. He was a conductor of symphony orchestras, not trains. A couple of years later, Jim asked me out to dinner on Valentine's Day, 21 years ago tonight. And we began a conversation that in many ways would never end. On the surface, we had very little in common. I was 35, Jim was 55, older than my parents. He loved British comedies and PBS. I loved Roseanne and Dateline. We proved to be complementary. Jim was calm, not a trait for which I am known. He was not particularly funny, but he thought I was hysterical, which pleased me to no end. Where I was reactive, Jim was responsive. He was kind, he was generous, he was the first to admit when he was wrong and the last to point the finger. We fell into quite the love affair. I was more of a pizza and nachos kind of gal back in the day, but a few months after that first dinner, Jim served me oysters with sour cream and caviar in bed and said, "Shelley Miller, if you will marry me, I will be the best man you've ever known." 6 months after the oysters, we were married, and everything seemed possible. Over the next year and a half, we adopted 3 newborns, 2 girls and a boy. A couple of years later, a 2-year-old son arrived on the scene. More than a few friends said something like, "What, are you lunatics?" And God only knows what they said behind our backs. Jim and I were stuck together, exactly what I believed I'd never want, with love and respect and friendship and 4 kids, all the same age. Jim was a teddy bear of a dad. I was the pragmatic disciplinarian. I steered the ship. He played Candyland with the crew. I put them in braces. He gave them M&Ms at bedtime after they'd brushed their teeth. We fought about the things married people fight about: money, sex, kids, and M&Ms. But at the end of the day, we were a team. There is no way to spin the way in which we came apart. Even with everything so right, I felt like I had my shoes on the wrong feet. A few hundred hours of therapy later, on the way home from a black tie wedding, and God, we looked great, I had to tell my kind and loving husband what I should have known decades earlier: I am gay. It was dead quiet in that car. Just for a bit. Jim reached over, put his hand on my knee, and said, "You're my best friend. I just want you to be happy." And just as he had promised, Jim Jones was the best man I'd ever known. There was fighting, forgiveness, laughter, and more than a few tears shed. But we stayed stuck together in a love of a different color. After the divorce, I wrote Jim a singles ad. I am the gay ex-wife of a man who is too good to be true. He lives around the corner. We have 4 toddlers, 2 yappy dogs, a bird, and very little money. He fell in love again, more than once. I fell in love too, along the way. Jim weighed in on the women in my life, and I weighed in on the women in his. When the kids were in the 1st and 2nd grades, Jim was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. We did not see it coming, and I will never forget the look in his eyes when the doctor left the room. The doctor said he'd have a few months without chemo, but as much as a year with. He chose chemo, knowing it would make him sick, but it would not change the outcome. The kids don't care if I'm sick. They care if I'm here, is what he said. He moved back in with us, back into the house where we'd started our family. My mother drove 56 miles round trip every Friday to take the ex-husband of her gay daughter to chemotherapy. She stayed with him through the infusions, and on the way back home each week, they had lunch together. Sunday afternoons, my partner usually brought over a big pot of mac and cheese. Our kids spent all kinds of time in his room talking about everything and nothing. He cajoled them into watching Russian ballet. They forced him to watch American Idol. On May 30th, the night before my 45th birthday, Jim wished me a happy birthday. I reminded him that it wasn't yet my birthday. He smiled and said, "I have cancer of the everything. I can't take any chances." And then he sang happy birthday. "My God, Jim Jones, you're still singing in tune." And he said, "Honey, when you got it, you got it." Jim died at home 2 days later, surrounded by 4 of his 5 kids, his gay ex-wife and her mother, the partner of said gay ex-wife, and a thoroughly confused hospice nurse. I am still asked how we made any of that work, and God knows some days were like swimming through molasses. But the question, though, how did we make it work, is not difficult to answer. That's what my people do. We stick